Hello, we're back from our break. Ice cream was very nice. Hope you got some for yourself. Um, Picking up on the question list, which I'm holding before me, were there any other actors, sports stars, people that were going to be Joes, Cobras, that you might not know about? Well, it began with Sergeant Slaughter, which, as you might remember, was a premium figure. This was not sold in the stores. And Sergeant Slaughter was a professional wrestler who was very popular at that time. And this was just the beginning of the crest of the wave that led to doing personalities from the world of wrestling. But this was just before it. Sergeant Slaughter was the first. And he was followed by a football player who was very popular at that time, William the Refrigerator Perry. So I did both of those. And the only other sports figure I can think of, those other figures were not for G.I. Joe line, but we might talk about that another time. Why did they never release the Rocky Balboa figure? Okay, well, this is a part of the same question. And yes, there was a Rocky Balboa figure. I sculpted it. And this was to be a G.I. Joe figure. And it did not come to fruition because there was a disagreement with the licensor over the licensing fee. It was more than Hasbro wanted to pay, and so the project was retired. I believe the Rocky figure was resculpted, perhaps by staff artists. It wasn't resculpted by me, and came out as Big Boa. So what remnant of my sculpting is in there, I don't know, because I never got a Big Boa figure to see what it looked like. And the Rocky project was great fun. I don't remember what the reference material was that was sent to me. I do remember watching Sylvester Stallone videos that were available. This is before DVD, and trying to get as much off of that as I could use to make a decent portrait of him. And also the Rocky drawings, the four views and the concept art were pretty good. The four view, I believe, was done by Mark Pennington. I think he caught the features of Sylvester Stallone very well. But of course, I had to add to that. We always do. Were there any rejected sculpts, and why were they rejected? Well, none of mine were rejected to my knowledge. As far as I know, everything I sculpted has been reproduced. However, there were figures that would be done by other sculptors, and they sometimes would come to me to make corrections, especially heads. Now, this was a time when I carried a certain amount of weight as a freelance sculptor. And I was fortunate enough to introduce Hasbro to a number of talented friends who were also sculptors. And I did it with a guarantee for the company, for my art directors, that if they didn't like the figure, if there was anything wrong with the figure, they would send the figure to me and I would make the necessary corrections. And so sometimes I would get, on one occasion I got a head that needed to be resculpted from one of my friends. And on another occasion I got Zartan's sister. And I believe Zartan's sister, Sorella, what is her name? I can't remember. Had already been produced on the market. So the first Zartan sisters were produced with a head that they didn't like, and I did a follow-up head. So I imagined that would be a very collectible figure, the first one. But I did resculpt Zartan's sister, and so there were figures that were corrected, changed, whatever. What they did with my figures, they never brought it to my attention if they did do that, and I'm sure that changes could be made by their staff sculptors quite well. Very talented group of people up in Pawtucket. Okay, along this line, were there any sculpts that were rejected that you were particularly disappointed about being rejected? No, As I said, if it was my work, I didn't know it was rejected. And as far as I know, everything that I produced was produced by the company. Were you ever approached to sculpt a big lob figure? Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Or was the concept never a part of the action figure line? Big Lob was a basketball player character from the G.I. Joe animated movie from the 1980s. I don't know anything about Big Lob. I never saw the G.I. Joe animated film, so sorry, I can't help you with that. Oh, well, here, why exactly did the Czarina head sculpt have to be remade? And did you have any particular feelings toward having to remake, i.e. being insulted, didn't like the first head anyway? Well, as I said, I didn't do the first head, and I think it was rejected because it was just simply not attractive enough. And that's why I did the second head. Oh, this is my all-time favorite question, and I hope it's your favorite question too. Why is Duke smiling? Because that's what the artwork had him doing. I don't get to make these decisions as to who gets to be a happier G.I. Joe than another G.I. Joe. So at any rate, I thought I would skip that question, but it's so amusing to me, I have to address it. Let's see. Since you sculpted the original Zartan, was the thing on his head supposed to be a cowl or hair? Since the early cartoons portrayed it as hair. Yes, it was a cowling. Again, I was not a follower of the cartoon series, so I didn't know that they had made changes. But as I remember the artwork, as I remember the sculpture, it was definitely a cowl. Whose face is on the Zartan mask? We covered that in the first part. Not mine, but you know, to Asians we all look alike. Okay. Do you have any Zartan-related stories? That was it. Okay. How rewarding was it to work with Ron Rudett, Kirk Bozigan, and Greg Brenston at Hasbro? I'm sorry, guys, for messing up your names. I only knew Ron Rudett. I don't know if Kirk and Greg were even working with Hasbro at the time that I was. I didn't have any contact with them. And I never got to work with Ron Rudett personally, because we always worked through our art directors. But I did, as I said earlier, I did know Ron personally, and I think he's a tremendous guy. He's an amazingly talented painter of miniatures, and the miniatures that he specialized in are called flats, and it's a German hobby predominantly. And flats are pretty much what you would think they are. They are cast as bas-relief, so they're flat figures with an intaglio on the front side and an intaglio on the back. So painting those figures is almost like painting a canvas, because you try to create the illusion of the third dimension by how you paint light and cast shadows. It's marvelously rare, even among the people who do something as rare as military miniatures. So very, very talented guy, and gosh, I would love to hear from him again, or at any rate, good man. Have you considered, or have you been asked to be a special guest at JoeCon? Yes, I have been asked. Gary had brought this up, and Josh Carlson brought it up and in their visit with me, and I said I can't see any reason not to do it. It's fun, you know. I've done some other shows where I've lectured and demonstrated, so I'm quite comfortable with people that way. Did you work on any vehicles? If so, which ones? No, I never had to deal with vehicles. That kind of thing would be done by a professional model maker, and even though I was a professional model maker before I was a commercial sculptor, I just sort of kept that thing to myself. Requires a different set of tools and shop facilities, which I used to work with, but I didn't have them when I was doing the Joe sculpts. Many of us have heard the story of Stephen King's son Owen creating an interesting character, Crystal Ball, in 1987. What is less known was the kid creation product of a year prior, 1986. Die-hard Joe fans speak of a legendary children's drawing other retired Hasbro workers talk about, passed around a year earlier from some kid's pencil drawing, and Ferber gave us the classic cult favorite computer character known as Mainframe. What do you remember of this early kid creation, Mainframe of 1986? Again, Crystal Ball of 1987 is well known. What do you know of other retired workers know of the pencil drawing, a children's drawing of Mainframe? All right, one question, short answer. This didn't come across to me in 1987. I knew nothing of this. But I'll tell you of a related experience, inasmuch as in my old neighborhood, when I was living in Flushing, I lived in a complex of two-story buildings and the inner courtyard, and we had a lot of kids around. And all the kids knew what I was doing and had a lot of fun with that. And I remember one kid, Justin by name, who came one day to the door and brought me a bunch of drawings of potential G.I. Joe characters and also vehicles that he would like to see made. I thought this was really a nice thing to do. I thought it was special, as a matter of fact. And looking at the drawings, this was about the time that the G.I. Joes had an F-14 fighter plane. So Justin created a drawing of an aircraft carrier. And I said to Justin, it's a wonderful idea, but when you consider how big the toy would be, it just seems very, very unlikely that anything would come of it. And so I sent the drawings to my art director. I think it was still Roger Avery at that time. And after a while, I got a packet back from Hasbro from the legal department with a very direct, terse note from the legal department saying that they can't accept these drawings and please don't send these things anymore. And, you know, because their fear was that if they came up with an idea and this kid thought it was his, they would be probably in for a lawsuit. We were in this age of litigious and frivolous lawsuits. And it disturbed me, as I imagine you would be disturbed too, because I remember as a kid writing a fan letter to a company and getting a wonderful response in return. But the world has changed. However, about 2 years later, Hasbro did come out with a 7.5-foot long aircraft carrier, and Justin was thrilled. But he made no legal claim for it, and Hasbro is still protected for that. But Justin did get his toy, even though it was highly unlikely. Can you imagine that? 7.5 feet long. Obviously a Christmas item. Do you have one? I don't. Oh, I did do the crew figure for that. You know, it was a super carrier and had one crewman. Okay? One. Let me tell you, a modern day aircraft carrier has a crew of 5,000 crew members, okay, at least. The supercarriers of today and the newer ones, probably even more. But our supercarrier must have been computerized because it only needed one sailor. This was also true of the space shuttle. I did one astronaut, okay? I think there might have been another figure that came with it, but I didn't do it. One aircraft carrier figure.